Good morning. My name is Ross Wilson. I'm the director of the Dinu Patriciu Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. Delighted to welcome you to this session on the New Silk Road, transit, trade, and economic development. This session is intended, I think, to reflect off of a lot of discussion and a lot of activity that's taken place over the last number of years, having to do a lot with Afghanistan, but also for other purposes, to develop trade and economic linkages across the Eurasian landmass, areas that have been cut off from one another by politics, by history, for other reasons for decades, if not even hundreds of years. This activity, I think, is reflected in part, or reflects in part interest that a lot of people have in trying to connect Afghanistan, a relatively cut-off country, to the rest of the world, to, in particular, to India, Pakistan and India, and through them to the rest of the world, to develop north-south connections from Afghanistan south and from Central Asia through Afghanistan south into South Asia as a way to diversify that area's relationships in light of the political changes that have taken place in the last 20 years. Third reflects an effort to help to facilitate the economic development of Central Asia and perhaps also of the Caucasus. And fourth, to exploit or develop, to generate trans-Eurasian trade and economic connections toward the Far East, toward Southeast Asia, that can exploit the political opening that has taken place again in the last 20 years. You don't have to sail a ship all the way around Africa or through the Gulf of, through the Red Sea and Suez Canal, potentially put yourself at risk with respect to Indian Ocean piracy or other issues around the Straits of Malacca. There are ways to move goods to generate economic activity across that region. And I think the efforts that the United States made to develop the Northern Distribution Network, primarily to facilitate coalition activities in Afghanistan, were, among other things, showed what kinds of possibilities there were when some diplomatic muscle got put behind trade and transit, and when some funds were made available for this purpose. This session, I think, is intended to take stock of that, to look at what are the various activities that have taken place, what are some of the things that need to take place to really bring about new trade, economic development, and other linkages across the Eurasian landmass, and also at what some of the business opportunities there are that are associated with this. To the extent that the New Silk Road is a government project, it probably isn't going to go very far. I can say that with confidence as somebody that spent 30 years in the U.S. government. To the extent that it becomes a business proposition, it will be very interesting, and it will move quickly, and it will then, as a result of those business opportunities, help Afghanistan, help the countries of Central Asia and the Caucasus, help develop new north-south and east-west trade and other economic, political, and other connections in a part of the world that is desperately, I think, in need of them. We're pleased to have with us 4 individuals. Their bios are in their materials, so I won't belabor their background. Sham Bathija is Minister and Senior Economic Advisor to the President of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai. Patricia Flor is with us from the European Union. She is Special Representative of the European Union for Central Asia. Fatema Sumar recently took up duties at the U.S. Department of State as Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs, working, I think, primarily on economic cooperation and integration. And to bring the business perspective, Ibrahim Turhan, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Borsa, Istanbul. Our format today, I will ask each of our speakers an initial opening question. Hopefully they'll respond 5 or 6 minutes or so. We'll go around, have a little bit of a discussion, and then very much open it up to questions from all of you. I will add this session is on the record. Those of you who are of a tweeting bent, please tweet away at AC US Summit. We will aim to end, since we started a little bit late because the previous session ran over, we'll try to end by 11:40 or 11:45, so you have time for a little bit of a break before the next session that starts at 12 o'clock. That session, Europe at a global inflection point, in one room, I think in the other ballroom 3, and in this room, systemic risk finding cyber subprime. So for those of you who are interested in cybersecurity, I think that will be important and interesting. So with no further ado, let me turn to Sham Bathija to talk a little bit about how the New Silk Road looks from Afghanistan. How does it relate? How do the developments taking place and that you would like to see take place relate to Afghanistan's trade and economic and other priorities? And what are you looking for? What is Afghanistan looking for from its friends, from its neighbors, and I think also from its friends, the United States, European Union, China, Russia, the international financial institutions? Please.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's a pleasure to see you. First of all, let me bring greetings from my government and the people from Afghanistan. I need not to say much more about Afghanistan, what has happened in the past 30 plus years. It has been very well documented, basically in all the international press, plus. So I will not go that far. But what these 30 years have brought to Afghanistan has devastation, I can only say. And that devastation was addressed basically by our good partners, good donors, and friends like the United States and so on. So for that, we recognize and appreciate their presence in that regard. Having assisted us from a very bottom of the economy and where all the institutions were devastated and suffered, to today, things are moving a little better, I would say much, much better in that sense. But we cannot be relying on all the time on the international community assistance and the donors. While we do so as a least developed country, landlocked country, conflict-affected country, and now conflict out of the country, we certainly will be expecting our donors, partners will stay with us, and they are continuing to do so, and they've all promised in this regard. But at the same time, we must also come up from our own point of view how to address our economic problems, security problems, and other issues. One of the things which we developed the policies and so on was the regional cooperation. The regional cooperation has become now one of the pillars of our foreign policy, and within that context, I personally was very delighted to launch in this beautiful city in 2010 in the RECA conference, what we call it the New Silk Road Initiative at that time. Now, New Silk Road Initiative could be any name because the Silk Road is a very celebrated sort of path which has come all the way from China, passing through Afghanistan and so on. But that is a framework, which we call it. We can put it in any name, under whichever name we all feel comfortable with that. But let's say for the timing is the Silk Road Initiative. What I had in mind was to see in Afghanistan, now as I'm principally senior economic advisor to the country and to the president himself, I have to come up with some new ideas, new innovative ideas, because the yesterday's Silk Road was fine, but today the Silk Road has to be translated into the new innovative ideas and so on. So I'm feeling a little bit very narrow-minded when I launched this initiative in Istanbul in 2010. I said, I will see the Silk Road from my angle, from Afghanistan's angle. And of course, Afghanistan's angle was the economic angle. For the time being, it was also security angles as well as others as well. So I'm thinking that there should be this initiative enlarged to include this trade and development sort of framework. Within trade and development, of course, Afghanistan will benefit quite a bit out of it, and plus many other all our regional partners. This will bring a little economic advantage for us, as well as security for us, as well as more closeness with our region, because as you know, our region is not an easy region. It's a region which is full of a lot of initiatives, a lot of challenges, and so on. So within that context of economic development, we expect from initiative like Silk Road, it will assist us, and we certainly would like to work toward that goal as well, to develop Afghanistan's geopolitical location, which traditionally we have been a facilitator, and now we will continue this role preferably in a new and innovative way, for example, dealing being a facilitation in the trade, in a transit, customs facilitation, transport, as well as investments. So what we have in mind is to really use our facility, our location, and so on, to be more helpful for South Asia, Central Asia, West Asia, and hopefully China and many other countries as well from Afghanistan. So this is what we have in mind now to proceed. And my feeling is it's a win-win situation. We will win, of course, from all other angles. As a matter of fact, just last year, there was a conference on the investment in New Delhi where I was talking to some of the people over there. And well, one person approached me. He said, well, Afghanistan, we have some difficulty in the transit. I said, why are you thinking only within this one frame that India must produce and send back to India? India can produce in Afghanistan. India can invest in Afghanistan, but export it to Central Asia, to West Asia, like China is doing. So think about a little bit innovative way of doing businesses and so on. So within that context, we are working on it, and we are expecting quite a bit from this initiative if it's fully materialized. Now, I must say that 2010, I launched it. Of course, the initiative has already been there. I have spoken in almost global forums on these issues, but somebody has to go move forward now. There are steps has to be taken. We can be talking on the theory to say, yes, it's a good idea and so on, but this initiative has to be now translated and implemented. I suppose during the course of this session, we may have some chance to go on to new ideas, how to move forward this initiative, which I'll be ready to contribute. Thank you, Ambassador. Good.
Thank you very much, Sham. I appreciate that good opening that I think gives us a lot of the reasons why this is an important conversation to have and extremely important for your country's future. Patricia, Flor, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the European Union looks at the new Silk Road, how it looks at Central Asia, Afghanistan, and the kind of trade, the broader trade and economic development priorities that Sham has talked about, and what is the EU trying to work on, please?
Yes, thank you. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. Let me say that, of course, when you look from Europe towards Central Asia, towards Afghanistan, towards China, then it's immediately clear that Central Asia and the region beyond is of strategic importance for us, because it does link China, India, South Asia with the European Union at the end of the day. And of course, the old Silk Road, as it was in historic times, also did that. So it started somewhere in China, in India, but it ended in, of course, European countries. So for that reason, to, in some sense, reconnect connections which were cut historically through a Soviet border which transected at the time this overall region is of strategic interest to us. And we do see a huge economic and political potential because, of course, Central Asia is landlocked, but also it's energy rich, and it has good growth rates. So it's one of these places in the world where actually we have a dynamic development. And therefore, to make the east-west connections from China via Central Asia to Europe, but also the north-south connections, actually would create huge benefits for everyone in the region. You mentioned the Northern Distribution Network. And here, I think, at the moment, what we have is we have an infrastructure in place. We also have the procedures in place. They are currently used, actually, for the withdrawal of forces from Afghanistan. But given that it exists, the real challenge now is how will this be used in the future? And I can tell you that countries in the Baltics, such as Latvia and Estonia and others, are very much looking forward to exploring the commercial and trade and transit opportunities that the NDN actually offers in the future beyond 2014. So this is very important. Another key element that we see is government-run initiatives are necessary but insufficient. There I agree. So and at the end of the day, we need to attract the private enterprises, entrepreneurs to engage on these issues. And that is why within the EU Central Asia strategy, rule of law, and thereby improving the investment climate has been a key pillar of our efforts. And I continue to believe that it is the foundation actually for leveraging then the overall economic potential in the region. It's not easy because it demands a lot of transformation and reform in Central Asia and of course also beyond. I've already mentioned Central Asia is landlocked, it's energy rich, and therefore to open this access to the south through Afghanistan to Pakistan, India, both to the ports, meaning access to the maritime seas, but also to the energy markets, because of course Pakistan, India, we've just heard it in the morning session, these are the growing energy markets, so it will be very beneficial for both sides. Therefore, from the EU side, that there are some huge infrastructure projects such as pipelines, TAPI, or electricity trade, Khaza 1000. This is crucial. The EU usually does not itself invest in these kind of projects, but not so long ago the EU created the Investment Fund for Central Asia, which is meant to leverage then banking funding for huge projects. And we very much hope that with the increase of activity by the EBRD, by the EIB, the European Investment Bank, then it will also be possible through these means to support these kind of infrastructure projects. But let me also say that the infrastructure, of course, it's basic, but it's insufficient. And that is where I come to the problem of regional cooperation in the overall region. There are still huge obstacles. Every border is a border which is very difficult to cross, sometimes even closed. So if actually you look at the transit opportunities or the intra-regional trade, then we need to have the hardware, but then the EU also, we want to bring the software in the sense of having customs procedures which are agreed, which are easy, where you know what you have to go through, having overall regional agreements, how you actually manage that. And that is why among the activities of the EU has also been integrated border management, which is about, having controls at the border against drugs, but also facilitating trade at these same borders. With that, the regional cooperation, I think in order to make it work, we also need to overcome some of the lack of trust which exists. And that means that the EU is currently trying to link our programs in Central Asia and in Afghanistan in order to allow more contact, more exchange of views, more interaction, because that I think is very necessary in order to establish the kind of confidence which you need for investment and for crucial economic decisions in this area. Another area which the EU has been targeting is get everyone into WTO. Another very important issue, you need a legal framework, common rules which everyone applies, and therefore we were very pleased to see Tajikistan enter WTO very recently, and we are currently working with other Central Asian states in order to facilitate their accession also to this. Energy. And of course, I have to mention this also, the Trans-Caspian Pipeline, so opening the Central Asian resources also for Europe, linking Central Asian resources, gas, to the EU energy market is another key target. It's a priority project where together with actually the Turkish government and of course Turkmenistan and others, the Caucasus states, Commissioner Oettinger is working very actively towards actually getting them there. And I think I'll stop here, and I'm sure there will be more questions to come.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I appreciate your introducing an issue that I talk about as the difference between working on some of the physical infrastructure needs, which are real and which are important, yes, but also working on the policy infrastructure pieces so that physical infrastructure doesn't just sit there, but that it can actually be used. Hopefully we'll come back to that. Let me turn to Fatema Sumar, Several years ago, one of the developments that transformed or reshaped some of this conversation was the call by Secretary of State, then Secretary of State Clinton, for a new Silk Road. Appreciate it if you could talk a little bit about what are U.S. government priorities in this area, what's the U.S. government been doing, and I think in particular, what are you looking to try to generate now over the next several years to push this forward, please.
Well, thanks, Ambassador Wilson, for inviting me here. I'm thrilled to be here on behalf of the U.S. State Department. I thought I could use the next couple minutes to talk explicitly about what we've both accomplished in the last few years in regional economic connectivity in this region and also the way forward. There's a lot of anxiety, as many of you know firsthand, in the region about where we're going with the drawdown and the transition in Afghanistan, what it means for Central Asian states, what it means for Pakistan, what it means for India, and the way forward. One of the areas that I'm really struck by as I work on these issues is that this is a vision, the new Silk Road vision that Sham laid out, that Patricia talked about, is a vision that increasingly is being owned by the region. Because these countries are landlocked, because they realize that they do not need to be trapped by their geography, they need to give themselves options. And that's something that's been supported by the international community, by donors, by the international financial institutions. And one of the most striking changes we've seen in the last few years is that this is a vision that has been come to own by the region itself. Now, yes, there's a lot of challenges. There's going to be a lot of problems. This will not be easy. It will be a generational challenge. But you're seeing some key pieces being built into place foundationally in the last couple of years that I wanted to discuss. There's 4 key areas that we have worked in the United States very closely with our partners in the region on. The first is regional energy. For the first time, you're seeing pieces come together of a regional energy market that links an energy-rich and energy-driven Central Asia with an energy-starved South Asia. And the pieces are starting to fall into place. 2 in particular that Patricia mentioned. The TAPI project. This is the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. We are moving this project forward. There's currently negotiations between the United States and Turkmenistan, for instance. Turkmenistan agrees on the need to engage an international oil company to move this project forward, and we're hoping to see key developments in 2014 to actually start the infrastructure and pull these pieces together, bringing on an international oil company. CASA 1000. This is another project where we hope to see some real movement going forward in 2014. It's a World Bank project that for the first time will link surplus hydro from Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan via Afghanistan and Pakistan. It will bring 300 megawatts that will stay in Afghanistan, and then Afghanistan would transit 1,000 remaining megawatts to Pakistan, so that Afghanistan both benefits from energy supplies from Central Asia, but also benefits from the revenue, about $30 million or so estimated, that would then transit over into Pakistan. Other parts of the energy grid we have laid in the United States for the last seven years or so. We have put together the pieces in place of helping create a regional energy market. This means helping Afghanistan create both a northern and southern distribution system in Afghanistan for its energy market. This means helping modernize Pakistan's energy grid so that we can actually connect all the dots and pieces for energy flows to go from Central Asia via Afghanistan into Pakistan, and hopefully with any types of political breakthroughs in the future between India and Pakistan, linking those markets as well. When we think about the new Silk Road, what we really need to be thinking about is the vision of regional economic connectivity and looking at the transformational vision of what we are talking about linking Central Asia to South Asia. South Asia is an energy-starved market of 1.7 billion consumers, right? That's transformational if you can build both the physical infrastructure to link the energy supplies down and also what we call the rules of the road, Ross, what you alluded to just now, in terms of actually unlocking those pieces so that the physical infrastructure can connect with the rules of the road, with the customs agreements, with the international agreements in place to actually move these supplies down. The second area that we've worked really hard on and we're seeing some real signs of progress is trade and transport. So again, this is both the physical infrastructure, and the United States alone in the last few years has contributed enormously to this effort, both within Afghanistan, where we've helped either rebuild or build about 3,000 kilometers of road. In the broader Central Asia region, this is the Karak region that the ADB has been working on, where we've helped contribute through our financing about 4,500 kilometers of road. In Pakistan as well, where we've been putting in about $25 million and to rehabilitate the Peshawar Ring Road that would connect the trade coming in from Afghanistan down into Pakistan. But it's also the soft infrastructure side that we just talked about, these rules of the road. So areas that we're really pushing and working on and looking to our partners for key movements on to move this forward include the following. We're looking at the Afghanistan-Pakistan Trade Transit Agreement. This was a landmark agreement that the United States helped support between Afghanistan and Pakistan in 2010. Now, for the region to really benefit from this, there needs to be key implementation steps that would have to happen between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And the encouraging news is there's been a great leadership from both countries in recent months to move this forward, and we're very hopeful that in the coming year you're going to see the kind of steps that both countries will take to really unlock that and hopefully even bring Tajikistan into that process so that we can really start linking these international agreements. We're helping support cross-border trade and transit agreements between Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Afghanistan. Ways to really make sure that we have customs harmonization and international standards that link these areas. We are looking at TIFA. We just had our latest round of TIFA meetings, which is the Trade Investment Framework Agreement between the United States and Central Asia. Afghanistan also participated in Ashgabat recently last week. Very, very productive set of meetings where all countries in Central Asia agreed once again on the need for customs facilitation for border, for the types of steps they have to take on the soft side to really unlock the potential of trade in this region. And we have key follow-on action items coming from these TIFA meetings that we'll be following through vigorously in the next year in the lead up to TIFA meetings in Washington next year. We have been supporting rail. Rail linkages have been a huge priority for the Central Asian and Afghan states, both through the CARIC ADB framework and also through bilateral cooperation within Afghanistan and Kazakhstan, where we've helped modernize the rail system as well. Other areas, the third area that we're looking at is customs and border security cooperation. Here we've been, along with the EU and other donors and the international financial community, we've played a key role on really looking at customs harmonization and both border security issues so that countries such as Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan that are on the Afghan border, for instance, can have both the confidence to keep their borders open and facilitate trade while making sure that they have the security measures in place to feel the level of confidence that they need to have these relationships going forward. What I'm struck by when I go to Central Asia is the importance of the perception of security in Afghanistan. Whatever happens next year in Afghanistan in 2014 with the transition, one of the key things that we all need to work on with our Central Asian partners, with our Afghan friends, is making sure that we're both communicating a message of what's really going on and understanding what the concerns are in Tashkent, in Almaty, in Ashgabat, and other areas in Central Asia to make sure that we understand what are the drivers that will help countries in that region keep their borders open, want to facilitate trade, and make the calculation that it's more economically worth it for their countries to facilitate trade, to join part of the international framework agreements on trade, transport, in other areas, so that we can help do this. And this is why WTO accession is so important, and we've been a key partner with our with the EU and others on facilitating accession. We were very pleased that Tajikistan came aboard last year, and we're very hopeful that Afghanistan and Kazakhstan will be able to fulfill the steps they need to take in 2014, and we're working with Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan for eventual accession in later years. The fourth area that we're looking at is really the people-to-people, and this is just incredibly, incredibly important, of really making sure that we have the linkages between our Central Asian partners and our Afghan, Pakistan, India, partners as well. And so we have spent a lot of resources, time, and attention on creating business opportunities and bringing businesses together. We just had recently this fall, we hosted the Central Asia Trade Forum in Almaty, where we brought together 400 business people and over 50 companies from Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Central Asian countries, so that they could facilitate business deals. I was in Almaty a couple weeks ago where we met with businesses that for the first time we had brought to Kabul earlier this year, and for the first time they had business deals in Afghanistan. And they were excited about looking at the potentials for bringing their goods and services down into Afghanistan. So I just want to end with this idea that things are happening on the ground, despite all the challenges, despite how difficult this region is. It is still the world's least economically integrated region in the world, and yet things are happening. They will take time, they will take persistence, It will take involvement of the private sector, but also commitments from governments to take the steps that they need to take to actually realize the potential of their both economic resources and their economic opportunities. You know, there's a lot of question in the region about U.S. commitment in this region post-2014, and I think through the initiatives that I've laid out here that we'll spend the next hour talking about, what's clear is, from the United States perspective, this is a region that matters. It matters to U.S. security, and through the economic connectivity partnerships that we are building in the region, that we've built over the last decade or so, we are here to stay. This is a region that we are working towards so that we can lay the foundation for the next generation so that they are part of a global community. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Fatema. I think that's an excellent overview of what the United States has been doing in a way of thinking about what's going to be U.S. policy in this part of the world after 2014, and filling that box with a very important economic agenda that's absolutely critical to the region and to the future of this place, as you put it, that's the least economically integrated in the world. Ibrahim, you've heard from our three previous participants here a lot of an articulation of a vision that I'm sure is a welcome one, a number of remarks about policy goals and policy actions that are being taken from the point of view of governments. How does that look from the private sector? What really are some of the opportunities that business can take on? To what extent can the Turkish business community be an important and interesting player? Please.
Thank you, Ross. Well, of course, first I should maybe say that any kind of policy should be focused on how to make the field for private sector stable and feasible to get involved business activity, out of which wealth, prosperity will be created and distributed among the people. Because if the very aim of policies are not providing the good to the people, then of course, and it would be really nonsense to have good policies. So I think the very existence of the private sector within this puzzle is essential. And when it comes to the Silk Road issue, well, as you all know, the Silk Road, if you consider the region, the countries through which it passes, it represents almost more than half of the world population, and actually almost 1/5 of the world production. And if we think about what is the outlook, future outlook for the world economy, well, having been participated in several G20 meetings, I should say that one of the topics all G20 leaders are really emphasizing is that in the future, the composition of the global output is going to change. And in which direction? Well, of course, until very recently, the contribution from advanced economies has been still constituting a major part of the global outcome. But starting from 2010, now it is almost 50-50 between advanced economies and developing world. But from now on, we will start to observe that contribution from the emerging markets and developing world will exceed actually the proportion by the advanced economies. So the emerging markets and developing economies, which are located throughout the Silk Road, will play a more determining role in the making of the global output as well. So, and this brings us that how important actually is to link those countries to each other directly. and not via another, hub, but in intra-regional trade, intra-regional financial transactions, so on and so forth. And of course, I mean, many things have been said, but another element which I think we should accept and admit about the Silk Road, that it is great, it is prosperous and promising, but on the other hand, you should rather be quite careful while traveling throughout this road, because there are some issues, and we all know. But of course, when I look again to the history, there is actually one nation who traveled along the Silk Road throughout the history, from the very beginning to the end. And this nation is Turkey. We traveled actually, starting from the Central Asia up until now, and we are accession with European Union in a way. It means that we are still moving towards the West. And I hope one day we will end the target, Brussels. So I think while traveling on this road, it would be a good idea to have a trustful companion who knows the road, each part of it, and whom you can really trust. And I think Turkey can play this role for everyone, not necessarily to the advanced economies that are located in the West, but also the other countries which are located throughout the road as well. From that perspective, I would like to come to a more concrete issues, what we are doing in order to contribute to this vision. Well, first of all, as Borsa Istanbul, I should maybe mention that we are already shareholder in 2 of the exchanges within the region, that are namely Kyrgyzstan and Azerbaijan. And only last year, I personally signed MOUs with 6 countries within the region, in addition to what we have already done. And those, of course, include technical assistance, capacity building, know-how sharing. But there are some more maybe deeper cooperation possibilities, that is to bring everything a little bit together. And actually, exchanges and capital markets are really crucial for the development, simply because, as you know, in all of those countries, in order to fulfill the capacity, in order to realize the capacity of the economic realm, we need startups, innovative projects, and this will be the engine of the growth, actually. Of course, the big projects, the large-scale projects will be over there. Will be there all the time. But this actually will maybe provide a first momentum to trigger the economic activity. But then, in order to distribute wealth throughout the society, we will need really SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, to encourage more maybe participation of the women into the labor force, to enhance the entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial abilities in those countries. And this is only possible through effectively functioning capital markets, because banks, as you know, and they are very legitimate to do it, are really very reluctant to lend to startups, and this is not their business actually. So we need capital markets, but the problem is that capital markets and exchanges in these countries are really very small and underdeveloped. So we need to create kind of environment to enable a paradigm shift, a one-off jump to the upper level. And this can be done only, in my opinion, by bringing them together and linking them to each other. And this will have another positive externality, that is, if you are doing business and you are making money out of it, it would be very difficult to get into a fight. Because, I mean, if anything I learned throughout my career, what rationalizes people the most is the economic benefits. And I think European Union is a very good example for that. And nations that fought for centuries with each other, when it comes to a common, economic benefit, they easily, become friends, and this is something extraordinarily important. Another issue, energy is mentioned a lot. And actually, I already mentioned last night, we are about to create an exchange for energy market in Turkey. And the ultimate aim is to improve the market conditions, increase the predictability, bring in a price discovery mechanism, transparent, neutral, fair, and acceptable for everyone. But again, there may be a side dish to this already, very appealing meal. That is, I'm sure everybody in this room knows better than I do, but there is a problem with natural gas pricing. That is, natural gas is priced based on oil contracts in most of the times. But oil market is rather a fragmented one. You have different, segments and different pricings. In contrary, natural gas and also electricity, which is closely linked to each other, you can, in theory, interconnect everything to each other. I mean, some projects have already been mentioned, but basically it is, in theory, possible to create a network starting from Central Asia up until to the Atlantic. And if you have the coupling ability, market coupling ability, it will allow you to transfer the surpluses to the deficit units throughout this mechanism. And of course, this will give us an opportunity to have, first of all, a more efficient price setting mechanism, and also a wider environment for further cooperation and partnership. And I think one of the roles that Borsa Istanbul can play is, in a way, as I mentioned earlier, to create a hub which will bring everybody in some way together. And this is a place where two continents and two civilizations meet each other. I mean, we can, I hope, provide an environment to meet more people, more markets, more products without any problem. So this will enable us to have an integrated and efficient market for natural gas and electricity as well. Why I am saying so? Because you need a transparent and neutral price setting mechanism in order to have predictability and trust, which will bring more investments in the future simply by improving the investment environment.
Good, thank you. I think that puts out a number of important issues on the table that are related to developing the hardware of a Silk Road, CASA 1000, TAPI, some of the road projects. Several of you have touched on different ways of getting at the software, whether it's people-to-people or efforts, concentrated efforts to develop trust and reliability or reliable relationships among some of the players. That seems to, and also a little bit of a focus on the private sector component. You could build all this infrastructure, but if it doesn't relate to economic development in Central Asia and in Afghanistan, if it's just transit between South Asia and Europe or between China and Europe, it isn't going to do that part of the world very much good. So I think that's a very good introduction. We have about 10 or 15 minutes. I want to open it up for questions. And here in the back, if I could ask you please to identify, the microphone will come. Please identify yourself and pose a question, and then Zal.
Thank you very much.
It's on.
Yeah, okay. I'm Asim Molazadeh from Azerbaijan. My question about, you mentioned, Madam Flor, about Trans-Caspian pipelines. It's a really very interesting issue, but why European Union did not make any step towards that? Because everybody's ready. But who will pay for this pipeline, which is vitally important for European energy security, and this issue stopped. Also, Silk Road historically was via Afghanistan, Pakistan, but at the same time, now there is a real restoration of Silk Road. Turkey and Azerbaijan completing a new railroad system which will connect China to Europe, and right now via ships goods moving between Europe and China about 2 or 3 months, but this train will give a chance for 2 weeks start a serious trade system. And at the same time, nobody mentioned China and China's role now in Central Asia in trade, because it's now biggest player with a huge financial opportunity and with various activity. Also, biggest ferry port on Caspian, we're completing 2015, and will give an opportunity to all Central Asian countries to come to access Europe. Thank you.
Why don't we take another question, and then we'll have a couple of pieces for the panelists to refer to. Here's Zal Halilzad in the front. If you wait for the microphone.
Zal Khalilzad with Griffin Partners. I want to follow up on the question just asked with regard to the role of China in particular. To what extent China is supportive and can participate or is willing to participate in the building of some of these transit facilities such as pipelines. I know that in the north-south dimension, I don't know where the Chinese stand. Central Asian resources such as oil and gas making it to India and Pakistan. But with regard to more east-west pipelines that could cross Afghanistan as well, the Chinese have been active in the resource development part of northern Afghanistan with the initial oil. CNPC won the first tender, and I think that was an initial move. What they are really interested in appears to be gas, which Afghanistan has more of. So how do we envisage the potential for cooperation between the United States, let's say, and China for some of these kind of infrastructural activities that are sort of demand-driven in terms of Chinese for resources, and the resources that China has with the ability to do things once they get involved.
Good, thank you. 3 issues to work backwards. China, discussions with China, China's involvement on some of the physical infrastructure, and I actually would add to that China's involvement on some of the policy infrastructure where China may actually have at least as much of a voice as some of the other outside players. The part of the Silk Road that goes through Turkey and the Caucasus, it's not just about Central Asia, but it's an east-west connection that can extend from Turkey all the way to China, as you indicated, albeit across a whole lot of borders that involves a lot of rent-seeking by people. And then third, Trans-Caspian Pipeline. Who would like to start? Fatema, do you want to maybe lead off?
Well, maybe I'll address the China question, because it's something obviously with President Xi's tour of Central Asia this fall that we have looked at very closely. And you know, let me take a step back and say that there's been so much discussion in recent years about what the role is of the United States, of Europe, and other players in the Central Asian sphere and how that works. And one of the transformations that I think you're seeing is that we really have moved away from this whole construct of a great game construct to a great game, where this is not a zero-sum game between the United States and China or Russia or any other countries. And in fact, really very much building on Ambassador Pasquale's conversation this morning of looking at, you know, the United States is very cognizant that in order to promote regional stability for both the region, but also U.S. national security interests throughout, this region needs to have options. In order for these options to be realized, many things have to come into play. And one of the things I was most struck by this fall, the ADB had its CARIC ministerial in Astana in October. The Chinese were present as a key member of CARIC. One of the conversations that came up again and again that was very striking is the Chinese recognition that in order to realize the potential on the investments that they have made on the physical side, whether it's in energy, whether it's on physical infrastructure throughout Afghanistan, Central Asia, and other parts of this region, they very much realize the softer side, the trade facilitation, the customs pieces have to work. And that's where the Chinese, the World Bank, ADB, the United States, European Union, and others really have a key role to play in construct with our Central Asian and Afghan partners. So there very much is this growing recognition, whether it's through the multilateral financial institutions such as ADB, whether it's in our conversations with our Chinese partners, that there has to be a way to unlock the trade potential for this region. It's not enough to just lay the physical hard infrastructure, whether it's pipeline, road, bridges, or rail. Because if you cannot facilitate trade between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, if you cannot cross from Kyrgyzstan into Tajikistan, if the borders close from Uzbekistan to Afghanistan, then the physical investments that you've made totaling in the billions of dollars of the last few years really don't get you very far. And that is something that I think that is where we're working towards in partnership together. And for this to work, you're going to have to see political will and leadership coming from our Central Asian and Afghan partners first and foremost. They are the only ones that really have the political will and potential to unlock some of these barriers. And we are there very much in a strong supporting role to help them do that. But I very much take, Ambassador, your point on China's role. There is a lot, they're expanding in so many different ways in order to promote their own energy security and promote their own economic resources, especially for the western parts of China. And that's something that I think can be very exciting for the region. It really does, it can drive demand. And it can really spur some of the kinds of needed investments that we need to see throughout this region to help unlock that potential. And the last thing I'll just say very quickly is that the United States, for all the obvious reasons, because of our large investment in Afghanistan, has been very focused on these north-south linkages, as you mentioned. But that's not to say that they're in isolation. And drawing to your original question, it's very much meant to complement the east-west connections that are taking place in a very real way across the region. I mean, you see this in Kazakhstan, for instance. I mean, you're seeing huge amounts of investment going from China and Kazakhstan over the Caspian into Europe as well. And so this is very much meant to be, these north-south routes are not done in isolation. We are in constant conversation to see how we can actualize the potential of all these roads and linkages to really make sure that these connections are multifaceted and crossing different parts.
Sham, I'd like to turn to you. I was in China about 1.5 years ago for discussions about the broader Middle East and Central Asia. When it came to Afghanistan, the Chinese had almost nothing to say. In particular, nothing to say about the connections that they saw or thought might be important economically, Central Asia, Afghanistan, South Asia. It wasn't on their radar. How does China look from Afghanistan in terms of the issues we've been discussing? Are they interested in this kind of economic development, trade, transit conversation across your part of the world?
Thank you. Certainly they cannot be out of it. After all, in the region, they are one of the biggest players. Now, at one point, we were even contemplating, we were discussing all the sort of possible ways and means, pretty much referring to what I earlier said, creation of a trade, transit, transport, customs, investments, and economic development hub, which I was promoting Afghanistan on it. Although Turkey, of course, our brother is connecting us east and west, but we are also connecting east, west, north, south, basically all of it. So let's call it that way, that we are promoting that hub, within our own context and so on. China certainly is a key partner in the whole region. At one point, nothing is final. It's not even in the final zero draft terms, but concepts are there. We have a border with China in the northernmost corner part. Of course, this is a Wuhan region, what we call it. It's full of snow and cold winter, to create a tunnel, basically, all the way, which connects basically all the way south, west, east, and so on. We have not overruled that part, but at least the ideas are still hanging around there. China is very, very keen to us. For example, if you see the Kashgar Kyrgyz border, 60-kilometer road which I have traveled, it's a very well-developed road.
Yes.
All they have to connect it and put this software issues, which you said, what we call it the trade facilitation part, it can connect all the way through Kyrgyz and continue all the way down to south to Afghanistan and further, for example. So China has a key role in it, and they are interested they're talking to us in a different format. And I think we will continue. But again, I go back to my original creating hub. Within the hub, many other interlinked issues could be addressed as well, both software and hardware.
Good, thank you. Ibrahim, do you want to go?
Yeah, just on, of course, since that Turkey and Azerbaijan, they have been mentioned. Well, of course, I mean, as I explained earlier, I mean, we really put a lot of importance on developing our relations, and of course, as Azerbaijan is, we see as an, you know, a necessary element to create, I mean, a Central Asian vision, because this will really act as a cement which will, you know, link and just like a glue that will bring everything together and make sure that the Central Asia and the Turkey will be an integrated market. And on China, actually there are many roles they can play. And actually I welcome very much the recent developments in China towards a more open economy and market-friendly economic environment. And actually, before coming here, I was in Abu Dhabi and I attended the WEF Global Agenda Setting Council, where we discussed about the possibility of having a multipolar international monetary system, which will really release, which will really relieve some of the pain we are having today related to having one single major international reserve currency. Because if they can manage in a way to open their capital accounts completely and get integrated with the rest of the civilized world standards, then of course renminbi can act as another, you know, very important facilitator throughout the region, because China has really a huge trade potential, especially when it comes to the region. So all is possible, but again, it requires policies that are clearly focused on developing free market economy. And this is, I think, the core issue, and why Atlantic Council is doing a great job to, you know, in a way, providing an environment to discuss how those issues are important for the countries.
Good, thank you. Patricia,
Thank you.
last comments?
Yes, I'll start with Trans-Caspian Pipeline by saying that the EU actually has done a lot. Just to give you an example, energy is still largely a competence of the EU member states. But for the first time, for the very first time, EU member states actually agreed to give Commissioner Oettinger a mandate in order to negotiate a trilateral agreement, an EU agreement with Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan as a political umbrella for the Trans-Caspian Pipeline. The negotiations are proceeding as we speak. So the Commissioner and the EU is very determined to go ahead with this. Of course, there are also then the transit countries, you know, of the Southern Gas Corridor. From the EU side, that the agreement on TANAP, the Trans-Anatolian Pipeline between Azerbaijan and Turkey, will now create the infrastructure to the western shore of the Caspian Sea, is an essential, of course, very welcome first step. But for us, we see it as a beginning. We do want to do the additional linkage across the Caspian Sea. And here I would also like to call on everyone to see that, of course, that means that the TANAP and the Southern Gas Corridor, as it's now being developed, should be open to additional sources of gas and should be open to third countries to fill then their gas resources into that pipeline. Now, on China, and just one word, a political word. First of all, security without development is not possible, nor the other way around. And so therefore we acknowledge this linkage, and that is why the EU is very committed to the Heart of Asia, the Istanbul process, because that is actually the platform where we are looking forward to implementation of projects, which of course should be Afghan-owned and owned by the people and the states in the region. And here I see that we have a real new engagement from China, because China, which had been a participant but observing what is going on, has now invited the Heart of Asia conference, the next one, to take place in China. And I'm convinced that means that they take more of political responsibility, and it means that they will also be more engaged in making some of these projects really happen. And they are, of course, already building the infrastructure. But I think, an investment in building a road pipeline, important. However, it brings political responsibility with it. And I do think that that has now also been realized in Beijing, so I see that as a very positive development also from the EU perspective. Thank you.
Can I just add 2 sentences to,
Please.
on European perspective, because I forget it, unfortunately. Last year, as you may remember, we hosted the EBRD annual meeting here in Istanbul. And during this meeting, myself and the chairman of the EBRD, we signed an MOU which includes joint action and cooperation in order to improve the capital market infrastructure in countries in Southeastern Europe and Central Asia as well. So this is, for example, a very clear sign to me that how European Union actually, of course EBRD is not a EU institution, but heavily supported by European Union countries, how they are really supportive to any kind of positive developments in the region.
Good, thank you all very much. Since we're so far over time, I won't try to summarize. I'll just close with a couple of process points. The next sessions are supposed to begin at noon, perhaps a few minutes after that. Cybersecurity here, Europe at a global inflection point in Ballroom 3. After lunch, I think for all of you who are here, we have another session that will be of interest on Afghanistan with Ambassador Khalilzad, with Dr. Ashraf Ghani, Hikmet Çetin, the former foreign minister of Turkey, who worked extensively on Afghanistan a number of years ago, and our own Shuja Nawaz from the Atlantic Council. Please join me in thanking our panelists.